So I hear you want to play Captain Kidd at the pre-release. Let's talk about it. Hello there, crewmates. Today we're going to be getting back to our pre-release focus, with it around the corner, and give a spotlight to each individual starter deck so that they have time for me to go through and think about more than rushing through to get them all into one video. So, let's go ahead and smash that like button and the subscribe button, or else this little guy right here, Babo, is going to be a sad bear. So our first deck is going to be Captain Kidd, and he tends to be one of the stronger choices, depending on who you're talking to. But why do they say he's really strong? We're going to go in and talk about it. So, starting with the leader himself, his activate once per turn at the cost of 3, lets you discard a card from your hand to restand him. So he is a leader that has 2 attacks. Now, why is that good? So that means you can have no board whatsoever and always have 2 attacks. Now, he's a very big end game card because when you are at full Dawn of 10, you can give him 7 Dawn, which makes him 12k, and then you still have 3 left over to use his ability, so you can swing 2 times for 12k. That means when you're on the opposing end of this guy, you are in the danger zone whenever you are at 1 or 0 life, because 2 12 attacks are always available to your opponent. So as soon as you have that kind of life situation, you're going to want to have at least 1 blocker, or else you're going to have to hard guard 2 12k attacks for minimal investment from your opponent. So you definitely want to keep track of your life when playing against Kidd. Now, what are his downsides? So, first of all, a 1-drop blocker is a very efficient way to deal with at least one of his attacks. So you can pay 1, throw out a blocker, and you can block the 12k. They may not even want to invest in the full power at that point. But he's also flexible because you don't need to put in the full 7 Dawn. You can give him, say, 4 Dawn, make him a 9k, which gets over the 2k, the 2-drop 4k guards, and efficiently swing for 9 twice. But his other downside is that you have to discard a card from your hand to use the effect. So you don't want to use him every turn, or else you're going to run out of cards in your hand, and then you're not going to be able to guard your opponent, and then you're going to end up dying, possibly before you can kill your opponent. But other than that, you know, he's a big beat stick type of card, but you can't just helmet him completely, or else you can end up killing yourself by just getting rid of all your cards in your hand. We're going to start with the big guys first, with the first super rare. So let's say we have the big 7-drop 7k blocker Kidd. Now, why is this guy really good? Because he is a massive blocker. So why is a massive blocker good? Well, let's say your opponent has, obviously the simplest way to go this is if your opponent is swinging for 5 or 6 to go over your leader, this blocks it for free. But if your opponent sees this blocker, they're probably going to go higher than that. So let's say they have an 8 or a 9k blocker, or a 9k attacker, and they swing. You can block with this Kidd, and then you can guard from hand on top of this Kidd so that he doesn't die. And you essentially saved guard because his base is higher than your leader. And that's why I like big blockers, because I can let them live when I block with them, so I can use them again next turn. He's also an efficient attacker, because his Dawn skill, Dawn times 1, says at the end of the turn you can switch him to active, which means he's 8,000 with a Dawn under him. You can swing at your opponent's leader or a character you don't want on the field, and at the end of the turn he will stand so that he can block again. So he's a very good card. As far as synergies go, you know, he's just a standalone solid card. He doesn't need anything to make him work. He's just good at all points in the game when you play him. He only costs 7 to play, so you still have 2 up to use your events over here. So with the repel, you can actually make him a 11. So even if your opponent is, you say you're having the mirror and your opponent has their Kidd out and they make him big like a 12k, you can actually block with Kidd, maybe use a repel, and then maybe an Apu, which is a 2k guard, which gives him 7. It gives him 6k, so he boosts up to 13, and he will live this Kidd and then say they swing the second time, so you take a damage, and then you have another blocker up still for next turn. Now the second super rare is the Trafalgar Law, and he is not a standalone card. He works with other guys. So when you see him, you're going to want to plan out what you want to restand with his on-play effect, which lets you switch one of your rested characters with Supernova or Heart Pirates with a 5 cost or less to active. Now let's see him go through here. It's like, I don't even think there is a good Heart Pirate target. I think the only Heart Pirate in the deck is Bapo, who's a 1-drop, so you're not going to worry about that. But right next to him is Basil Hawkins. And Basil Hawkins is a 6k that can be restood with Law. And if you have his ability active, which you probably do, which is Dawn times 1, once per turn, your turn, after this character battles an opponent's character, ban him. So let's say you have Basil out and you set him up last turn. So you're going back into your next turn, you give him a Dawn, so he's 7k. You swing at, let's say, a character that you don't want on the board anymore, or their leader, and maybe they block it, but to get his ability active, you need to swing at a character. So you swing at a character, then he restands. Then you can swing at leader, or even another character, and then play the Law, and he restands again. So that's 3 7k attacks off of Basil and the Law. So Basil Hawkins is actually a decent standalone card by himself because he can go for a character and then for face, or 2 characters, and if they do block him, that counts as fighting a character, so there's no reason to block this card, because it would just restand again anyway. So if they just have blockers, they just take the attack or guard it. But with the Law, he gets even more utility by being able to restand a second time, and because he's pretty big at 7k with a Dawn under him, you could even give him another Dawn, make him, 8, even 9 if you want to get, super power in there, because if you give him 3, make him 9 if you have full 10. You can play the Law for 5, which you would, 8 use? Which leaves 2 up for a defensive card, which is nice actually. And you get the 3 9 attacks in, and then you can swing with your leader for 5. So this is actually pretty good in that regard. X-Drake can be restood with the Law, and he works with your leader because during your turn, while you have a Dawn under him, and while he is rested, so after he attacks, your leader and all characters you control with Marine and Supernova gain 1,000. So by giving him a Dawn, you make him a 6k, and then after he swings, he essentially gives all your other guys the same amount of power from the Dawn. So it's very efficient use of a Dawn. You make him a 6k, and then everyone gains 1,000 anyway, like you gave them a Dawn. And it works on your leader, so he's gaining a free Dawn that you don't need to give him manually also. And this deck actually has 4. The starter deck comes with 4 of the X-Ray, so he's relatively consistent to see, and he's nice to see. You have the 6k Vanilla, who unfortunately he's like a Navy. Kobe is a Navy boy, so he doesn't really work with any of the cards that use Supernova or Heart Pirates or any of that, but he's literally a Vanilla. 2 copies of Killer. He's a standalone good card. On play, KO an opponent's rested character with cost of 3 or less. It can kill, little attackers. It can kill, besides little attackers, I mean, there's not going to be like a random blocker rested unless you, use a card that rests something. But he's a trigger, so if it's hit from damage, you can play him for free. And regardless of if they have something to kill, I mean, that's a free body. He's 3,000. You give him 2 Dawn, he can swing for 5 at the leader. We have the 3-drop 5k. He also does not have the attributes you want. He's a fire tank pirate, so he can't be used with any of your stuff. He is a pure vanilla. Apu does have the Supernova trait, but you're never going to want to play him, and the reason for that is he's your 2k guard, and the deck comes with 4 of it, so you can tank with this. And his attacking effect really isn't that great. You give him a Dawn, he rests an opponent's active Dawn when he's attacking. But he's only going to be a 4k, so you would need to give him at least 2 Dawn, or have like Drake up or something to make him 5k. And it just kind of trolls your opponent's like act if they were trying to defensive play a event. He kind of messes with that. But I mean, you have to set him up the turn before, so they're going to know he's there and can't attack. So if they really want to play a defensive card, they'd really just leave an extra one up. It shouldn't really do anything. It's staring them at the face. He's not a surprise, is what I'm trying to say, because he doesn't have rush or anything. So you're gonna have to play him the turn before, and then your opponent's staring him at the face and be like, oh, I know this card does this. I'll prepare for it. There's really no reason to summon him. Just keep him in your hand for the 2K guard. We have the 2-drop 4K, which I want to point out is a Kid Pirate, but he's not a supernova, so he can't be restood by the law or anything. Uroj actually is a supernova, so he can be restood with the law and everything, and he's not terrible. With a Dawn under him, if you have 3 more characters, it includes himself, so you only need him and 2 other guys. He gains 2K. So with a Dawn under him, he's 4. With his own effect, he's 6. So that's not bad. And then with, X-Drake over here, he's actually 7 if you swing with the X-Drake first, and then give him a Dawn. He's actually a 7K 2-drop. It's not awful. It's just you need to prep for him. Without his effect on, he's pretty bad. But if you have a board going, Now, Babo and the 1-drops in general I want to talk about, because this card's almost like a red herring. Like, it's almost like when you start playing the game, you're like, oh, it's a 1-drop, I'll play it. But with 3,000 power, you almost don't even want to play it, and then you have to invest Dawn in it so it can attack. Most of the time, when it comes to a 1-drop, I just keep it in my hand for guard, and especially with Kid, you can always use it for discard, because you need discard fodder for the Kid. So, unfortunately for Babo, because he's a 1-drop vanilla, I wouldn't even play it. Like, if you saw it your opening turn, I'd just keep it in hand. Like, that's kind of how I feel about the 1-drop vanillas. 4 copies of the 1-drop blockers, they're good. Always value the 1-drop blockers because they're very cheap, and if they block an attack, that is only 1 Dawn that you played that you paid to block a full attack, and that even counts for really big attacks. Like, this can block the 10-drop Kaido for free. So don't underestimate the 1-drop blockers. Your starter-ish card, which is the best 1-drop in the deck, is Jewelry Bonnie, which there's 4 copies of, and she lets you try and get to the pieces that you want. So by tapping her and paying 1, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and reveal any supernova type card and add it to your hand. So that counts for your events as well, which all of them are supernova, I believe. Yep. So all your events can be gotten with Bonnie. You can also get a blocker. You can get your big boss blocker. You can get the combo piece Law. You can get the good Hawkins. You can get the booster Drake. You can get killer. You can get defense with Apu. You can get, a little mini attacker if that's like your own. This is probably like you only get him if he's your only target. And then you can get defense. And you can even get a offensive card, which is Straw Sword. So this is a very flexible card that you definitely like to see in possibly even your opening hand. Like if you open your hand and you have a Bonnie in it, you probably don't want a mulligan. Now, what do you want to see in your opening hand? I would consider saying Bonnie is a good opening hand card. Seeing the 7-drop early is probably good because there's only 2 in the deck, so if you shuffle that back, you're not guaranteed to see him, period. If I open the Law, I probably wouldn't keep just for the Law because he needs other pieces anyway. If I open the Hawkins, I'd be like, at least I have a decent attacker, so if I have nothing else going on, maybe I'd keep that hand. But other than that, I'd probably mulligan that hand if I didn't see the 7, the Bonnie, or the Hawkins. It's probably where I'd stand on a mulligan in this deck. Going into defensive cards, they gave you 4 copies of the 4K Plus. That's pretty much all it does, because its secondary effect is you get to unrest one of your Dawns as active during your opponent's turn. So unless you have a handful of events, which is bad anyway, the second effect really doesn't come up. But let's say you have Repel and then you have a Scalpel. Because Scalpel also, unrests 1 and gives you 2K, all you need to do to play both of those cards in one turn is have 2 up. So regardless of what order you play them, just, efficiently guard with them. If you play Scalpel, you go down to 1, you go back up to 2. If you play Repel, you pay 2, you go back with 1. So either way, because of the way that they work, if you actually start bricking on them, you can in fact play both in one turn for minimal investment for leaving Dawn up at the end of the turn. So they're not bad. And they gave you 4 Repel and 2 Scalpel, so you're pretty defensive. Now, Straw Sword lets you rest an opponent's character. Now, this lets you effectively try to clear things, because there's no hard removal besides the killer. And this works with the killer, so you could pay 2 rest and then pop a killer, but that's a lot of investment for killer only popping a 3-drop. what I like to do with a card like this is rest the blockers that are in your way. So like I said when I was going over the Kid Leader, is that blockers are his weakness because you can't out them inherently. So if you go all in on Kid and make him a 12k and swing twice, if they have a blocker, they're only going to take 1. But if you use Straw Sword, and then give 5 to Kid, make him a 10k, and then swing twice 10, they don't have a blocker, that's still 6k guard that they need to block for twice. Whereas when he's 12k, that's 8k guard, so 16k guard to block both. It's just not happening. Its trigger you can pretty much completely ignore. Play a Supernova with 2 or less from your hand, I think. What's that? That's Bonnie, Capone, and Rouge. Like, it's terrible. You just add it to your hand. Scalpel's trigger, switch 2 of your wrist to don't active. That's pretty awful too, unless you're in a weird situation where you have Repel in your hand already, but you didn't set up for it. So you pretty much just add this to your hand, and Repel does not have a trigger. So as far as your events are concerned, I really wouldn't use their triggers. I just add them to your hand so that you can actually just use them. And then your only trigger at that point is Killer, but that's fine. I think that about goes over most of the synergies I can think of for this deck that, after reviewing it and doing stuff. So I think that about wraps it up. Next time, I'll be giving time to the Kaido starter deck and going through some interactions there. And make sure you sub if you're interested in that type of thing, because that pre-release is right around the corner and you don't want to miss out on figuring out what you want to do with these cool 4 structure decks. So, let us know which of these decks you're looking forward to playing most at your pre-release if you intend to go, and I'll see you in the next one. Make sure you hit that button so you can get notified when we post it. See you around.